Welcome back to Voice of the Valley. Today we have an excellent guest, Dennis Riddick. He is a cybersecurity engineer and AWS certified. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm good. Good day to be here.
Yep.
Been a long time coming. So
we're truly blessed to be here with one of the top people in the AI world. So for those of us that aren't really familiar with cybersecurity, what is it?
so you going right into it. So cybersecurity, I mean, it's not one type of tech, right? You can have different folds of cybersecurity. You can have GRC, you can have red team, blue team, and then you can have different, just IAM administrator, and then you can also have just like even if you're starting out in IT, you can have a label such as help desk, right? Help desk, you're changing passwords, you're helping users get back into their systems, you're fixing printers, things like that. All that is part of IT getting started in help desk and cybersecurity.
And recently there has been a surge in AI usage. Where do you see this trend heading in the next 5 years?
AI's, it's been leveling up, the last couple years. They're starting to put, a lot of different tools out there that, help on a day-to-day basis. But AI has been around for years. It's been around since going back to like the early mid 90s when IBM released their their AI solution on the AS 400. That was kind of like a supercomputer. It dug in like mainframe, a lot of data. Like I got to trying to think. So the data, as far as hyperscale data, big data, where it assess applications, data as far as financial applications, it would go out and do like a data encryption, data analysis on these large supercomputers. So it's kind of been around a long time, in the financial world. Government agencies been using it for a while, but now it's starting to be mainstream, as far as the user side, right? The user computing, the ability to research with AI now. You can research AI on as a user, right? So it's been available. It just hasn't been available to the user.
How about the surge of databases recently, especially with AWS? How's that market looking?
Yeah, so I mean that's where your AI data is stored, right? So any type you type a prompt into ChatGPT, that data is going to be stored somewhere, right? So it's not going away. Every day it's going to get larger. The databases are going to get larger because you're storing more data on a day-to-day basis. So that's being stored in the cloud, secure, and it has to get replicated, right? And also has to be retained for, quite some time, depending on the regulations of that cloud provider.
That's super cool, man.
Yeah.
I don't understand a lot of what you're saying, but just for us simple people, what does a normal day look like for you at work?
Well, I mean, data, it does, it's not, a day-to-day is not really the same, I mean, when it comes to IT, you have you come in, either you're the remote or you deal with you kind of, most of the time you're dealing with a PM, right? It's project manager. They have a goal, right? They have a goal for your project. You come in, if there's any issues, they'll report it. If you're starting out like help desk, it really depends. If you come in as a help desk engineer, you're going to be looking at a ticket system like a ServiceNow, remedy system. You come in day to day, you look at your tickets, see what you missed from the previous day. If there's any high priority tickets, you want to, get them out the way before you start your day, right? So if you have emails that came in overnight, if there's a, high priority issue, server went down, the CEO can't access his email, things like that. Those are day-to-day things that happen. For myself, I'm far removed from help desk, but I still have to deal with PMs. I still have to deal with different clients that have issues. So it depends. We're really normally we'll give an update, from a day-to-day, what happened yesterday, what needs to be done, going forward, right?
Do you remember, I think it was a year ago when Microsoft went down, but that was a cybersecurity attack or something like that?
Microsoft, I think it was Azure that went down. That could have been a DNS problem.
Hmm.
I don't think they were attacked. I think it was a DNS issue. They didn't have DNS replicating to a different region, and one of their services went down. But that affected the other services
Yeah.
because all the DNS was affected by
Yeah,
that.
millions of people couldn't work. So
Hmm.
is that where I want to say warfare is kind of going towards, like AI? And like we have this
Yeah.
company we keep hearing about, Palantir, right, taking
Hmm.
over. So is that kind of where the world is going, that all this money's being poured into defense mechanisms for the cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that's cybersecurity. I mean, it's basically protecting systems, hide data that's real value, like a nuclear system, right? So you want to protect anything, and that would be a DoD level, security where you have high level applications that can't be touched. So you have all that behind firewalls. You have that replicating. You have disaster recovery. In case the system does come down, you can recover within seconds, right? And that's and that we're getting into high level cybersecurity at that point, right? And you have to be cleared, like clear. You have to have security clearance. You have to have certain DoD regulations and immaculate background check, things like that. So
So what are some of the companies now leading the tech revolution? Like if you had to say it, your top five.
leading the tech revolution. I mean, as far as AI right now, the biggest company is obviously OpenAI. They're setting the bar pretty high. Obviously, Google, Microsoft, they're all in there. They're all competing, and then you have, I would say, the metas, right? All that, the social network, that's huge, right? So, I mean, it's the business is run by technology, right? So you're gonna have those social networks that are built on technology. Those they're always going to be top five, top three, right? And because they're all built off infrastructure, off a network. So communication all through the network. IP addresses, firewalls, all that. That's never going away from AI, right? So AI is not replacing any of the infrastructure. You have billion-dollar budgets for data centers right now. So that's
Mm.
physical hardware. You still have to, somebody has to come in there and physically stack and rack, servers, networks, got to configure it, cable it, fiber channel to storage, switches, things like that. That's never going away from, the IT world. And when it comes to, what AI is going to be revolutionized, right?
Hmm. My father was an electrical engineer. He worked for IBM.
Hmm.
And back in the day, they said the money was in the hardware.
Okay.
And a little company that some people know of now is called Microsoft came along, and
Hmm.
they basically were working adjacent to IBM.
Right.
And IBM said, you can keep your software. You can keep your software. The money's in hardware.
Hmm.
Now look at how the tables have turned.
Yeah, I mean, it's a software, everything's software based, right? You have SaaS, you have storage as a service, things like that, and that's software based. Anything applications are software based, and that can stretch, from on prem to the cloud. And yeah, that changed quick. I mean, the hardware is always going to be there because you have the applications have to be stored on hardware. At the same time, the hardware has to be compatible, with certain software that you're running, for your application.
What about the new trend of Bitcoin? Is that something that is also going to take off in your opinion?
um, it took off, but yeah, Bitcoin's. I mean, that's not going away. What's happening now is you're going to build infrastructure off of the Bitcoin. How it's mined, things like that. So that again, that goes back to the hardware. That goes back to the cloud. How you're trading on the Bitcoin network. That's network based. So you have a network infrastructure. Again, we're going back to the hardware. Network is hardware based. So whether you're in the cloud or you're on prem, you're always gonna have a network to communicate. You're gonna have to communicate with Bitcoin. The backbone.
So is Bitcoin more than just a store of value?
Mm, what do you mean by that?
Because the saying is that Bitcoin can't be hacked,
Okay.
right? So it's secure.
Yeah, it's definitely secure. I mean, it's
Mhm.
encrypted. Any transactions are encrypted, and I don't see it being hacked anytime soon.
Mhm.
just because of the backbone, the way it, the infrastructure is built. Is it 100%? No. I mean, nothing's, uncrackable. But it's definitely a situation where it's so secure right now that, you don't see a lot of incidents with any crypto infrastructure.
So let's rewind a little bit. I kind of want to get into who you are, Dennis.
Mhm.
How did you get started in the tech and the iCloud industry?
hmm So I started in tech back in high school. We're going way back, so I'm not going to tell you what year, but I used to just, I used to be in, building programs, things like that in high school. Basic, going back to basic programming. Back when they had Commodores, throughout the high school. I just got involved with helping the students out, helping people out with uh, the computers. I just had a love for computers. I used to program, my Commodore before high school, when I was a kid. So that's how I got involved. It just had a love for, computers, picking them apart, building my own and then structuring them as far as, any of the new programs, things like that, the gamings, right? So I just create my own games with the basic programming, so that's kind of the, start of, me, just technology wise.
Did you ever finish any of those games?
Uh no.
No.
I was a gamer, but I just did it for fun. Like I used to, create games, things like that. Just
Yeah.
and then like Donkey Kong, things like that. We would adjust that, and edit the programs. But I never one just play the game, right? So it's
Yeah.
more, let's
It's like a prototype almost.
yeah, let's create something, based off of Donkey Kong, things like that,
Yeah.
and things, But
So what do you think some of the biggest challenges you faced early in your career?
the biggest challenge probably, just I was getting paid a lot. I came out of school, I was getting paid a lot, and I just felt like, this is too easy. Something's wrong, right? So, I mean, I'm fixing computers, I'm doing this, and it just didn't seem right. Like, it's more of a thing. Like, okay, am I doing my job right? I'm on the job for 2-3 years, and they're paying me all this money, and I'm not doing really nothing. Like
Yeah.
not nothing, but it's like this is too easy, right? Some this can't be right. So I moved around a lot, just because I had that thing in the back of my mind, like, okay, this I must be doing something wrong, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, as far as just skills itself, I kind of threw myself in a lot of projects where they needed resources, things like that. So I learned a lot of different skills in the beginning, just to set myself up, if I had to move on. I always paranoid in the back of my mind, like, I might lose my job, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was, through myself as a resource, kind of learn a different skill. I started off as a Linux administrator, backup recovery, and then I kind of transitioned into more of network engineer, right? So
Nice.
building switches, setting up disaster recovery, things like that. And then I kind of, transitioned to the cloud world, storage.
You were always in this area? You were always kind of based
I
in this
always,
area? Or?
I started my career at Lucent Technology,
Yeah.
Really?
which was AT&T. Yep. So I started there. That was in 97, 98. And then I moved on to JP Morgan, which is in New York.
When did you stop working for Lucent?
What after
Two-
they went through the
2000.
floor?
2000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
My father worked for Lucent.
Did he?
yeah, same
awesome.
here. My dad used to work for Lucent.
Yeah,
In
nice.
Browningsville, right?
Yeah, I met a lot of good guys there. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
It was around that time too, like 97.
yep.
And then
Mhm.
when they go under, like
Yeah,
2001.
I was
Eight.
I
They
was
went
gone.
8 or 9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gone by the time they went.
Oh,
under.
you were?
Yeah.
How was your experience? I want to touch before we get to JP Morgan.
Mhm.
You said you felt as if it was too easy,
Mhm.
which is weird because usually it's the opposite. For 99% of people, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were born with this talent, or
I-
do you?
I don't know if it's born with the talent. It's just I don't know. I mean, I just
Passion?
love computers.
Yeah, passion, right?
Growing up, I just got into it. I played football, I played basketball, and all that. I just did that because my friends did it. Right. I never cared about football, basketball, and none of that. I just did it. Everybody else is doing it in the neighborhood. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go out and play. But inside of me, I'd rather be inside on the computer, fixing shit, right? But for the most part, it's in you, right? Like if you got it, you got it. Like you just, and some people don't, take advantage of that skill. I could have been doing something else, but I kind of got stuck into it. I actually almost did a couple other things, but for the most part, I stayed into tech.
So when you transitioned to JP Morgan, what changed in your role, if anything?
What's really weird is I started at Omnipoint. My first job was Omnipoint. Let's circle back a little bit. My first job was on Omnipoint, which is now T-Mobile, and Microsoft came in. They bought all these computers and servers and things like that, and they brought me in to upgrade everything to Microsoft NT. So we're going back NT, which is like their server. Is more secure version of Windows desktop, and they were putting this, rolling this out, Omnipoint. So being that, I transitioned to Lucent. Lucent, I actually started being a Linux administrator, which is we're backing up all the Lucent servers, things like that. JP Morgan happened to be the same deal. Was backup, storage, day-to-day recovery, things like that, and backing up applications. So it was a weird transition, but because I transitioned from Microsoft to a Linux guy, then backup storage.
And then going to cloud,
Mhm.
was there was a major difference, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean that's a 10-year difference, right? So you have, when I was at JP Morgan, 9/11 hit, right? So I was there in Wall Street, 9/11 hit, and that changed everything in tech, right? So you have regulations, you have compliance, you have to keep 2 copies of data. It can't be within the 300 kilometer mile frame, and you have to basically have 2 copies of everything. And it's a lot, and that's where cybersecurity kind of took off, because now you have regulations, compliance, what data could be accessed, what's the retention on that data, emails, things like that had to be kept for 7 years, 10 years, things like that. And that's where everything took off as far as storage. Now you're keeping 2 copies of data. You're going to have two store. If I buy one system in Newport, New Jersey, I'm going to have to replicate that data to say I'm New York or Philly.
Mhm.
Right. So, and that's where the cloud comes in place, right? So cloud comes in place because we don't want to keep buying all this physical hardware. We want to use somebody else's, right? Equinix was kind of the first cloud provider, which is, their data center. They basically offsite your store. Instead of you having it, say for example, we have servers here in this office, we're going to lease it out from somebody else where they handle all the hardware. They monitor all the systems. If anything comes down, they monitor. That's their job. All we want to do is have the data available for our applications. We want to store our applications. We want to make sure it's available, and Equinox is going to handle all that for us, right?
All right, I've been saving this question. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
here.
Dennis, are we in a simulation like the Matrix?
We are. This is AI right here.
Oh no, seriously, is it possible that
Mhm.
we are living in a simulation?
Anything's possible. Anything is possible when it comes to tech. We could be in a simulation.
So we could be in a computer right now for
We
all we
could.
know.
We could be.
So therefore, have you ever met an NPC? An
No.
NPC?
No.
No. So they don't exist.
I don't. Never met him.
So growing up, did you always think you were going to be an entrepreneur?
Not really. I mean, I just told myself I'm gonna go to work, every day and see where it leads me. I end up, I had a couple businesses that I, ventured out into. I had a bar. I had a couple trucker companies, things like that. And then I have, my tech stuff that I always had, forever. So I do, a little helping people on the side, but small businesses, things like that. I help them with their IT stuff. I help, friends and family. It's just certain small businesses that I had. I help build up. Things like that. I've done a lot. I help a lot of kids get into tech. I don't really post it. I give a lot of things away, laptops, things like that. Every year, but I don't post none of that. Like I've been doing it before Facebook. I've been doing it before Instagram.
Mhm.
So the one thing I never said, things that I give away, I'm not gonna post it, and sometimes, people don't want it once you want to know that, oh, somebody gave me something, right? Or you help my kid with, college this month or something like that. So I do a lot of that, but I just don't, you know, advertise it on Facebook. And that's not to say you can't do it. I mean, it's just something,
Yeah,
I said before, even social media, I was doing it, so it's, it just helped me out, make connections, things like that, so.
that's great.
You have an event coming up pretty soon, right?
Mhm.
You want to talk a little bit about that event?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be doing a workshop, kind of like an intro to IT, cybersecurity, what the pathways are, what for 2026. I mean, you're seeing a lot of tech layoffs, things like that. So it's hard to get into tech nowadays. When you don't normally it's I mean, getting in tech. You apply to a job, HR hits you up, and you interview and you get the job. Right nowadays, it's more. You have so much AI, so much fake resumes out there. People are just, mass applying the job. So it's not getting through the system, the ATS system, things like that. And they're good. I mean, they're good candidates, but it's not reaching HR. It's not reaching the hiring managers. So you got to think out the box. You got to network. You got to go to these little conferences, things like that, just to make connections with hiring managers. Right. So it's not the normal, the way it was 10 years ago, where, okay, I'm gonna apply on LinkedIn or Indeed, and boom, I got a good resume. They're gonna automatically hit me up. So a lot of kids are getting frustrated. A lot of people that are transitioning in tech are getting frustrated. There's a lot of layoffs on but as far as tech itself, like there's it's a lot of hiring going on. And it's not being seen because all the AI stuff, right?
So would you say then the best way to get a lead for a job is to, work with someone like you, go to their workshop, or at least find a connection in
Mhm.
the cybersecurity AWS space?
Yeah, I think that the best way, the best pathway is the network, right? You find somebody on LinkedIn, or you go, you look at these different networking events, these conferences. I mean, that's the leading way right now. You get in somebody with somebody, you get when you go to a conference, you actually get to go up to their booth, introduce yourself, and you're actually talking to, HR hiring managers at these events. So that you put a name to a face, you get a card, and they give you direct access, to them, right? So it's not like you're hitting somebody up on LinkedIn and they're not checking their mail. So
Hmm.
you're actually with them, in order to, impress them. You're there instead of just sending a resume out. So
And should regular people who hold simple jobs be worried about AI taking over their jobs or no?
um, in some instances, AI. So the thing with AI is it's a tool, right? It's like Google. Like it's giving you more access to information, at speed of light, right? So you type something in, you could have a business plan right away. You don't have to deal with paying somebody $1,500 for a business plan. You could write it up in Chat GPT or Perplexity or one of these other tools, and that's kind of eliminating, certain job, not eliminating the job, it's making the job easier for people, because you're still going to hit them up, for that information. It's just at the end of the day with AI, it's at your fingertips now, and you're able to get that data yourself.
Then how far away are we from robotics coming into the game
Mhm.
with strong AI?
I think robotics is good, for certain aspects. I mean, it's going to help. Again, it's going to help people with jobs. It might take away a couple jobs, but at the end of the day, you still are going to need that human element. When it comes to customer service, things like that, in order to push your product, push your application, things like that. You're going to need that human element. Robots not going to being able to tell you how somebody feels about a product.
Hmm.
So you're going to need that.
And what about warfare? We're seeing a lot of drones being used in the Russia-Ukraine war. Is that gonna? You think that's gonna keep continuing? So at a level in which we don't even need ground
Well,
infantry?
I mean, I can't even go there because there's so much technology in government right now that we don't even know about, right? So that's definitely like that's going to be type of technology is going to be top tier forever. It's always been, they're going to get the best technology before anybody. Um, China, Russia, things like that. They're on another level when it comes to drones. Government warfare, right? So.
So, what do you think? What industries do you think AI will impact the most in the next 5 years?
I think right now it's impacting, coding, computer science. If you're a computer science degree, uh, you're in a little bit of trouble because the intro, the help desk, not the help desk, excuse me, the roles that come in as far as, right out of college. Those are like junior roles, entry level roles. Those could be affected. I'm not saying they will be affected, but I feel like, some of that AI can, the coding, Claude, things like that, that can help with, some type of, savings as far as those entry level roles. Will it help, those students get jobs? Yes, you can actually vibe code instead of saying, okay, I'm coming to entry level. I built, 10 applications and now I have experience, right? So now you're not junior level, or now you're not entry level. They use vibe coding in order to build these, applications and showcase their skills to these employers. So that's how AI is going to help, not eliminate those entry level jobs, because it's no longer going to be entry level. You're going to have skills when you come in to apply for those jobs.
I feel like it's so easy to make a website now too.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You could just do it on ChatGPT really quick.
Yeah. Well, you can use ChatGPT. There's Lovable. There's Base 44.
Which one's your favorite?
V0. I would say Lovable is probably my favorite, but I use Claude in order to build that.
Claude's great too.
I use Claude. I enter the prompt in Claude, and then whatever Claude comes up with, you can enter that into Lovable. Lovable has the everything built in. It has a database, a backend, all that built into to their application.
So
Instead of having to build your backend,
Mhm.
you can integrate that with Lovable does that for you. Right.
So you use Claude the most?
Yeah, I use Claude the most. ChatGPT for just day to day stuff. If I have to automate something, I use Claude. ChatGPT just for a good prompt to put into Claude, right?
Yeah. Now I feel like a lot of those, if they don't take away the jobs, they're taking money away from them at least, because like lawyers, like
Mhm.
you used to pay lawyers to make contracts.
Yeah.
You could just go on and make your own contract now.
Yeah, you can make your own contract, your own website, but when it comes to that, like you're only really, so say for example, I'm creating a front end and Lovable. I really don't have that back end. If there's any customization, things like that, I want to create, say for example, I want to create a billing, right? I want you to subscribe to my website. That you need to know the back end. You can't
Mhm.
just do
Yeah.
everything from Lovable or Claude. You gotta. There's still some skill level on the back end where
Yeah.
you're gonna need that piece.
It's more like templates and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, as far as creating a template and a landing page for a website, that those are great tools. But then you take the landing page, you give it to your web developer and say, okay, this is how I want it to look.
Mhm.
Right? It's really not going to be a one for all, with these vibe coding apps, right? So
No, we're having a huge surge in AI uses in college.
Mhm.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's unprecedented. So you're now, I want to say 100%, but it's not. It's probably like 96%.
Right.
But everyone's writing essays with
Mhm.
ChatGPT. Everyone's cheating with ChatGPT.
Yep.
Do you think there is no other alternative?
Oh, I think it's a good tool.
Mhm.
Just like you had Google, we had Google, right? So I mean, you can't blame the kids for wanting to have a tool that's going to help them, right? It's not gonna. It's not. I mean, when you say cheating, it's one thing with cheating, but it's also where they have to have the knowledge to actually put the prompt in there, right? So you have to,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have human element to that as well. You're going to be able to tell if it's AI, so they're going to have to add what their sources, things like that, all that into the, to the prompt.
I just really want to quick ask this. Do you remember in school when they were like, you can't use a calculator
Yeah,
because you're not going to be walking around with a calculator?
right.
Now we have a calculator on our phones.
What's the
24/7.
difference, right? I could use a calculator for my algebra back then, right? So, I mean, I'm not. If I need to do algebra now, well, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do it on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure it out quick.
So I know we went over a few, but what tech skills do you think are the most important and valuable right now?
I mean, that's everybody's different. It depends what skill level you're at. I mean, if you're trying to break into tech, things like that. If you're coming from, it depends what field you're coming from. You could be coming from a field like healthcare or something like that. Say you're coming from healthcare and you dealt with Epic, Epic HR. those type of systems, it's an easy transferable skill because now you have the epic backbone. Now, okay, you want to get into tech. Now you can basically focus on healthcare systems, and from a tech standpoint, right? Instead of starting from starting from the floor down and saying, okay, I don't know anything about tech. I never dealt with any type of applications. Now it's an easy transferable skill. If you're coming from no IT skills at all, you're trying to break into tech. You want to learn the basics. I mean, you want to learn, help desk. You want to learn, how to communicate with customers. It's a huge customer service type of basis. When it comes to IT, that's a huge part of it. Communication. Even if you don't know how to fix something, right? You communicate with your client. And say, okay, we're working on the issue. We have a ticket open. That's all they want to hear, right? They want to make sure you're working on it. Things like that. That you don't have to fix it right away. It's just more, okay, I'm working on this. The communication got to be key.
Now,
Right.
for those of us who are investors, what precious metals or things are going up? Like, I know, is gold really used a lot in semiconductors?
Uh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't get that too deep.
Okay.
I don't get that too deep in the like the chips and things like that.
Mhm.
NVIDIA, GPUs are used a lot. So yeah, I mean it's out there, but I'm not that deep into tech.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So like
So
GPU related, like
yeah.
GPUs are everything now.
Mm-hmm.
More important. Back then it was the CPUs that were everything.
Yeah, it's still a processor. It's still, it's still the brain of the computer. So it's going to be doing all the calculations, doing the ones and zeros back to the application to the GUI. It's make sure you're utilizing memory correctly, and that's the brain of the computer. As that evolves, computers are going to get faster. You're going to be able to enter more AI, LLMs. You're going to be able to design that, and that's why GPUs right now are, in high demand.
So would you say if you're coming straight out of high school, would you say it's a better idea to go to college straight away, or to try to network your way into the tech world?
Well, the great thing about college is the network,
Mhm.
right? So I would never tell a kid not to go to college, right? Depending on what he's trying to do, college is going to be your network, right? So if you go to Stanford, you're going to be around a bunch of smart people. So you don't want to skip that part of your life. And the reason why is because you get around them, you learn different things that you're not going to be able to learn on your own, right? You're going to be able to network them. Those 4 years of your life, or whatever it is, 2 years, you can meet some really intelligent people that you can build a life with, just based on, businesses, things like that. So I would never tell a kid to skip college. College isn't for everybody. Depends what fields you want to be in. If you want to be a coder, if you want to be in IT, you don't have to go to college. I mean, there's boot camps out there. There's things that if you're a fast learner, it's recommended for you, but you have to be dedicated, right? You can't just say, okay, I'm gonna take this boot camp. Because boot camps are normally, they're gonna be, you're gonna try to train yourself, right? You're gonna have to be consistent with learning every day, getting on the computer and doing it. It's not like college where you have to show up. And if you're a kid that you have to have that, you're not going to get up and get in the classroom on your computer. I would recommend go to college.
Were you a college student?
2 years, yeah.
How was that experience like for
It
you?
was good. I mean, I met some good people. I still deal with today. I went to Allentown Business School, just to get my, certification. Then I went to Northampton Community College, and I finished at Muhlenberg.
Mhm. So Dennis, what are some things you do outside of the tech world that
Mhm.
is fun?
I travel a lot. I spend a lot of time, traveling, speaking engagements, things like that. So those are the big things. I don't do, I don't get too involved with, politics or anything like that. I have a whole Facebook. It's crazy. All they do is talk about politics all day. I'm like, I don't know where you guys have the time, but I just, I like to travel. That's pretty much it. Try to see the world, and IT's taking me places that I thought I'd never been. So,
What daily habits help you level up professionally?
Daily habits. I mean, I like to work out. I mean, that keeps the mood focused, right? It's just a mental thing, right? With when you're working out. And for me, I'm not a big, I'm not big on, just waking up and having a routine. Is like I'll just wing it, day to day. Normally it starts with work, right? So I'll check my email and that'll get me focused right away because I know I have to do it. I know I have a long day, right? I look at my calendar and say, okay, well, this is gonna be a rough day. Let me get in the gym for half hour, 45 minutes, and get to work, because I know it's gonna be rough. But yeah, I mean, day to day, I mean, I'm just a focus. I'm focused on work, and that kind of helps me focus on other things. What I need to do throughout the day.
Nice. I kind of want to get back into the career part of it.
Mhm.
What certifications give the fastest ROI when you get into
Yeah,
business?
and that goes back to, I mean, the work that you put in. Like if you're just coming into IT, there's different certifications for entry level. There's different certifications for if you're transferring from a different field into technology. There's certain certs. I mean, if you're coming in, let's say you're coming in, you don't know anything about IT. You want to get certified. There's standard certifications like CompTIA, cybersecurity, Sec Plus, things like that. Those are entry level certs where, okay, I could level up, by taking these certs, and but you also have to put the work in. You also have to have the acumen to work on a lab, right? You can't just say, okay, I'm going to get a cert and I'm going to get a job. At the same time, you're working on that cert. You want to be building labs, things like that, in order to showcase that on your LinkedIn or on your GitHub or what have you, wherever you're documenting it. If you're not in a school setting type of location, you want to have those type of certs in order to showcase that on LinkedIn, right? It's not 10 years ago where, okay, you go get your CCNA, which is certified Cisco certified network engineer. You go get that and then you have a job. Like 10, 15 years ago, you were guaranteed to get an interview and they'll be knocking your door down, right? Nowadays certs are more less relevant because you have uh, you have these labs, you have different jobs that they want you to showcase your skills before you even get an interview, right? So I wouldn't really focus on just certifications.
Gotcha. Now, if you were talking to a small business owner,
Mhm.
what would you tell them? What would you say they should use first, like utilizing AI? What would help them the most?
Um, Depends on what type of business. Say for example, it's real estate, right?
Mhm.
Real estate's a big one with AI now. I mean, you can automate a lot of your showings. You can actually create. You can use HiGen to create your double self. You can create a video walkthrough of a property, and you can post that to Instagram, Facebook, what have you. But that's comes with automation, automating your showings, things like that. That'll help. And then just dealing with customers, things like that. You can automate, listings. New listing pops up. You have AI go in and automate like a CRM,
Mhm.
email that to a bunch of investors that are looking for properties, right? Which is takes away from a lot of the stuff
Yeah,
you do every morning. Like sometimes you got to wake up and then you have 20, clients or emails where you can automate that. You can receive the email and respond to that with AI.
that's
Now,
huge. Can you give another example of another
Mhm.
industry where it
Yeah.
would help?
So another industry, I would say, um, hmm, you give me an
You think
example.
construction?
I don't know too much about construction, but I think um, the project management piece with construction, right? Construction
Mhm.
project management is the same deal where you can respond to emails, you can respond to clients and give them updates, right, through AI. That's a big piece of construction, right? A lot of the communication has to be there. What type of order you need for that day, what's the budget for a construction project that can be automated through AI.
which country's ahead in the AI race? USA or China?
I don't know too much about China, but I know they're always ahead in technology.
Really?
I feel like that. I mean, that's my opinion, and I don't know too much about their AI backbone, but I do know their technologies is pretty, on a different level right now.
What about nuclear energy and solar energy? Where is
hmm
that trend heading?
I think nuclear is more, that's going to be key. It's going to be valuable with the new data centers, right? So the nuclear energy within the data center, we can't. There's have to be regulations around how much energy is being spent within the data center because they're building them up in, residential areas, things like that, and they're coming up. That they're it's being the data centers are being expanded, every day. They're spending billions of dollars data center for AI for, all these new GPUs, servers, things like that. The backbone for AI. So I think nuclear is going to have to take over for that. You're not going to be able to use your industrial cooling, heating, things like that. So that's where nuclear comes into play.
What about solar?
I don't know too much about solar.
No. What about Elon Musk?
That's
Nah.
hey, you asking them questions, them rough questions. I don't know about Elon, man. He's a tech guy though. So you gotta give him his props. So that's it.
Are there any books or resources that kind of change your mindset when you're coming up in the tech industry?
Yeah, I probably, just studying for my CCNA, just getting that network backbone, the thing with the network that runs everything. That runs your network is on the internet. You got to know DNS. You got to know switching, routing in order to be a cloud engineer. I mean, there's certain parts of cloud that you don't need to know about the network, but everything runs through the network, right? There's no connectivity, there's no backbone, there's no communication. Your apps aren't running. You can't get to websites like you said. Microsoft was down. That was a DNS problem. That's a network problem, right? So if you have no network, you have no access to your applications. You have no communication between your users, your accounts, and your clients.
How
So
important is social media
mhm.
to the tech industry now?
Social media. I mean, as far as communication or just
Tech entrepreneurs.
tech entrepreneur. I mean, it's a tool. I mean, it's a networking tool. You don't have to be. You could network with somebody in China. Not having to be there. For me, when I came on board, everything was you had the meet and greet. Your interviews were on site. You never had this remote interview thing. Where you get on Zoom and then you interview somebody. I had to go on site. I had to meet with 3 people to get in JP Morgan. Then I had to meet with 2 managers, come back and meet with 2 managers in New York. It was overwhelming. I'm like 24, but eventually I got the job. But yeah, I think that's where social media helps out. Like you could communicate with more people. You can network. You can have these online forums. You can learn things from different people with the social network. That's the key. That's the whole point of what Facebook was supposed to be for. So you can network with people and your family in California. You get online and communicate with them. Right. That was a key point where they're not missing their families, things like that. We were going to create a network where we can communicate everybody on campus. We're going to create Facebook. But now it's expanded to it's just out of control. So
For sure.
So Dennis, when you travel, you go to a lot of events, you give a lot of talks. How does that look like for you?
so yeah, I mean that's something I picked up a few years ago. During the pandemic, I started speaking a lot. Remotely, on Zooms, things like that, helping clients out. Upskilling them. So lately, a couple guys, put me to the side, say, "Oh, you should speak at events, things like that." I never thought about it. I was always, stayed to myself, got my job done, and went home. Right. So I didn't really think people would be interested in learning about tech, as much as they did. But after, like I said, after the pandemic, IT picked up. A lot of people were interested in it. Are working from home. A lot of jobs are out there. Just cybersecurity jobs. Just because everybody's working from home, now you got to, everything has to be secure. Encrypted. Emails, things like that, because you're working remotely. So when with that, that setup, I actually, started speaking at certain events. Helping people speak. Just talking about the trends, technology, how to break in. what paths are good, and that's ever evolving. That changes day to day, month to month, and it's always not one person. It's not one person can get in a certain way. Another person's different depending on their skill level. How much they're willing to go out and learn on their own, and everybody's pathway is different into tech, right? So you can't it's just not one and done. One size fits all, right? So you have to kind of know the person, get to know the person, their background, and then kind of go from there and help them.
So what makes you decide if you're going to be mentoring a specific individual?
Uh, I mean, just making me decide. I mean, it's more just talking to that person, see where the skill level is, and then just adjust. Assessing whether they're willing to go out and follow the pathway that you're giving them, right? So if they're not willing to do that, like if you could feel it, they're not going to put the work in. I don't want to waste nobody's time, right? So if they're not going to do that themselves, I kind of lean off of that, right? So it's not that I say I'm not going to mentor you. It's just, I'm going to give you a certain thing. I'm going to give you certain roadmap. And if you're not following that roadmap, you're really not, interested, right? Like there's certain things you want to do. You see the TikTok or something, you don't have to put the work in. There's people out here saying, oh, you make 100K, take this boot camp, things like that. And then people are following that, right? And it's not their fault. It's just, it's a trend. So,
Do you have anyone that you mentored lately that has kind of blown up in the tech space?
I do have a person. He got a job at Bebron, local here in Allentown. He has no certifications. He has no, college background in IT. I helped him get through, get that job. We did we skilled up, on some. I put some projects together for him. Helped him with, interview. Help him with the, mock interviews, things like that. And got him skilled up. He did the work though. Like I'm not saying I did everything, but I gave him kind of a roadmap, what they're going to be looking for, things like that. He interviewed for about 6 months. He wasn't getting nowhere. He got frustrated, and to go to the warehouse. And now he's working there. He's like, oh, I could make more at the warehouse. I'm like, yeah, you probably could, but you're not going to be, if you want to be in IT, you got to take a step back, to get forward.
So Dennis, how much can someone straight out of college expect to make for their first year working at cybersecurity?
So the problem with cybersecurity is really not entry level, right? So you really need to skill up. A lot of students are coming out of college and they're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get a job in cybersecurity, where really the best pathway to go is like an entry level IT position, which can build you skills into the cybersecurity realm, right? There's so many pathways in cybersecurity, right? So just coming out of college making that type of money, it really depends what path you go.
So, brother, there is a new thing coming out called the metaverse. Are you familiar with that a little bit?
No.
No. So the metaverse is basically a computer program in which you put on some goggles or whatever, and now you're in the simulation world, right?
Yep.
So where do you think my generation, I'm
Mhm.
25 right now, where do you think my generation will be in the next 30, 40, 50 years?
In the metaverse.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
But no, I mean, technology changes so much. I mean, you can't really predict it. I mean, like nobody really predicted AI and, coming into, the pandemic. AI wasn't really around like it is hands on day to day now. So everything is changing so much. I never try to predict technology, or the infamous question, where you see yourself in 5 years, things like that. So my answer is always, I'm always evolving day to day with technology. So I just want to be, build my skill set up, on a day to day, month to month basis, during the changes, because technology changes so much. You have to stay on top of everything. So,
It's all about adapting, right?
absolutely.
In any industry,
Yep.
especially tech.
Yeah. Rather than just, the infamous answer is hard work, hard work, hard work.
Right.
But for someone that wants to be successful nowadays, what can they do strategically to set themselves up?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, the hard work is always, you can work hard and not get nowhere, right? So you can't just say hard work. What are you working on? Are you working on the same thing? What skills are you working on in order to, level up? I mean, for me, when I'm teaching my mentees, it's more focus, have a roadmap where you're focused on, you have a straight line of where you want to be. You have a plan mapped out where you want to be instead of going with the trends, things like that, getting out the way of your focus, right? So you really want to be on top of, your roadmap, your plan to get where you need to be from A to B, right? Instead of, just, saying, okay, there's a new trend, let me work on that. You want to stay focused, right, to your goal.
Mhm. So Dennis, it's been an excellent podcast with you. We really appreciate you coming on, and we're definitely going to have you again with some other tech gurus.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you guys.